Hello, and well, welcome to another tour of my palatial home. So this week's project is, I've called it From Room to Room, and I'm suggesting that I hope you've got more than one room, because the idea is that you would be outside a room looking in. So we've got a hallway, and I'm going to do some drawing here. I've set up, I know the light comes and goes, but I've got the door open to the sitting room. I've got a piece of grey paper, so I think it's worth working on a grey sheet. I'm going to divide it into 4, and I'm going to do 4 studies. So this is a piece of A4. I'm going to work with charcoal and chalk, and I'm going to try and do 4 studies of the different open doors. I think it's quite good to work with the charcoal, because the thing that you're going to be challenged by initially is scale. And by forcing you to try, if you'll do this, to draw on A4, a quarter of A4, everything's going to be pretty small. So I want to get in the door jamb on this side, and then the door. I also like this painting up here, catching some light on the frame. So I've really got to reduce everything. So I think a good place to start probably is with the door. Use the door as your measure. So that's the door, and that's the door frame there. Charcoal's good because I can change it, because I'm going to have to change it, because it's an awful lot of stuff to get into a tiny space. But I do know that what I would like in my composition, as well as the door and the jamb, is a bit of that painting over here. So I'm going to go through a process of adjusting things, because it's likely that I'll make things too big at the start. But I've got my door as my reference, and I also like the shadow that the door is casting. So the door is my reference. Low down on the door is the handle and that central section. There's a bit of perspective. The lower line of the door and the upper line are converging, and I've got to play around with that a bit, those angles. So the door is my measure, and I think the fireplace starts there and only goes up to about there. So that's my mantelpiece and fireplace. So I'll work on that. The usual thing of looking with your eyes half closed is quite helpful. Getting some dark shapes. There's lots of clutter in that room, and so that picture's much smaller. There you go. Everything's much smaller than I thought, but I'm going to stick with the door as my frame. You just see that. So I can work longer on this, and the process is definitely going to be one of changing, smudging, rubbing out again, until I get in the charcoal something I'm happy with. I think what's quite nice, certainly here in this flat, is the light. You can open a door like that and have light coming through. So to get in some of the darker elements, like the frame of the door, and then to take the charcoal, take the chalk and put in some light. We've got some nice light coming across the carpet. We've got some bits of light coming through the back of the door. I like the light on the frame of the picture here. But it's quite good with charcoal and chalk to do plenty with the charcoal, smudge it, strengthen it, put in some dark accents, and then add some chalk. Because I think to keep the charcoal and the chalk separate is quite helpful. If you mix charcoal and chalk, you sometimes get just a very grey, dull effect. So I'll pause there and I'll move to a different location. So I've moved position. I want to show you my drawing of this particular view into another room, which I quite like, because we've got the costume mannequin there. There's a cat coming in too. But when I try and show you my drawing, you can't see it. So we'll see how I get on. So again, I'm trying to work with the door as a reference. I think it helps to get in the dark door jambs. You can see I can't do straight lines either. That's fine. And that door, I'm not going to do anything of the outside wall, because what I do want to get, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to use the door as my reference, but I do want to get what I'm seeing through there, which is, where should we start? Maybe start down here with the rug. Okay, chest of drawers there, but that only comes up to about there. So maybe that gap's a bit wide. Got to play around a bit. Chest of drawers there. Mannequin here. I mean, what I find, and I'm sure you'll find the same, once you start drawing something, it just gets bigger, because you concentrate on it and you give it more attention and it just grows. So this is why I'm suggesting the charcoal as a good way of putting things on, smudging them, taking them off again. So my mannequin is much too big, and I think it's because my doorway is a bit wide. So if you can develop a way of working where you can actually change these decisions, well, that makes sense, doesn't it? It also means that you're kind of seeking a composition. You haven't entirely made up your mind, because it will depend on whether, it depends what you fit in, and as you play around with things, you can be changing your mind. So that's another view there. Neither of these rooms have got any figures in them. Got a cat, but so I'm going to look at that as well. See if I find another room with a figure. But also it might be a case of having some photographs with figures in that you try and put into these spaces. So I just need a bit of chalk. Oh, I can do it, sorry. So there's my view, eyes half closed. I see the light, lots of light coming down at the bottom here. Even some light on the door, which is quite nice. And I just find if you work on grey paper with the charcoal, you can quite quickly manage the light. And it may be that what you're doing is using the door frame in particular. Depends what your light is like, but the door frame in particular as a frame to the scene. And often it's the case that when you add light, highlights and dark accents, that makes things stand out. So that's what you're going to be thinking about. What am I trying to make stand out? And I've already said that this mannequin is something I'd like to draw attention to. So I'll pause that. Oh, that's that one there then. So I'm trying another view, and I've done the same thing of framing the scene with the door, looking with my eyes half closed to see light and dark, often coming back to the door and being strict about keeping the door as the scale and gradually making things smaller. There were other things like putting a pattern on the carpet that I found quite helpful. But another dimension then, so Iris is standing at the window, and if you would like to include a figure in a composition, it would be good now just to get some sense of the scale. And as I've been saying already, you know, if you're anything you draw in the room, you're likely to make it bigger just because as you start to focus on it, that just tends to be what happens. So maybe if you've got a model, and I'll also provide some photographs of figures, but it would be quite good to have somebody give you a sense of the scale. You know, how big is a figure going to be? And if you could work with that in your little study, quarter of A4, and actually get the figure to fit, then you've got an indication of how that figure is going to work. So I've done a kind of silhouette, as Iris is against the window. I might just put a little bit of light here and there, which will hopefully make me more convinced by my figure. But it's just really to give me an idea, and I might try a little bit of background light as well. So it's just to get a sense of the scale of the figure, and maybe having put the figure in, I have to look back at my drawing and see what else do I need to adjust. You know, if I darken the door, does that help? Or do I actually soften the figure slightly? So that would be another thing to consider. Do you want to include a figure in your composition? Okay, so it's time for me to show my workings and talk a little bit about getting a painting started. So here are the three black and white, grey and white charcoal and chalk drawings that I did on grey paper. I've actually been doing quite a lot of work under lockdown of this sort, looking from one room to another. We get amazing light in our flat on these sunny days that we've been having. It's in the back of the house in the morning and then in the front of the house in the afternoon. And I did a number of drawings, and there's another video that I could give you a link to that I did on this 14 days of art and creativity, where I did this drawing here, looking through to the sitting room, where I'd started with this morning's demonstration, but this is in colour. So I did some charcoal drawing on the grey paper, and then I put a bit of pastel on top. I did another one here of Ivan's room, and there's this really lovely, we've got this stripped wood, we've got these red rugs and things. So there's a certain light, often in the afternoon, which is really glorious. So that's what I want to work with. So in the same group of pictures, I also did one of Inez sitting on the sofa doing some knitting. So what I want to do is combine this drawing that you saw me do this morning of Inez's room. It's got the tailor's dummy. I want to combine it with this colour sketch. So what that might mean for you, having done your black and white drawings, which I think are really valuable to sort out what you want to include and to help you get a sense of what's possible. I'm getting a phone call here, so pause. Okay, so set up to start the painting. I've got my black and white sketch, which is the scale, because I want the top of the door. I've got my colour sketch, which has got some colour in it. And I've also got this photograph that I took at the same time of my model on the sofa. So I'm going to try and combine all these things. And because that's a little bit complicated, I would say start monochrome with thin paint, just a bit the way, rather like the way you would have started your charcoal sketch. So the scale, if you like, is this. So I want the door jamb on the left, and I want the top of the door, and the base of the door. But in there I want I do. I want maybe a bit more sofa. Just a little bit more. But where's it going to be? Let's get this door. So that bit of the door, I've been using the middle section of the door, which actually isn't in the middle. It's a bit lower down. There's a bit of a guide. There's no point me finishing a door until I've got everything else moving. But that's the door there, and looking at my drawing here, I'm going to have a bit of the rug going off into the room, and then I'm going to have a bit more sofa. It might be quite nice to get the tailor's dummy in as well. So that's the door handle. And it's going to be the same experience here as I had working in the charcoal. I'm likely to make the things inside the room too big, just because I'm interested in them and I'm looking at them. I'm ignoring, well, I don't know, the door jamb, but I'm really looking at the things inside the room. And going back to this one then, so I could get the tailor's dummy in there. And then I've got a little bit of interior to deal with. I've got curtains. So this is transposing, really, from small studies into something a bit larger scale, but trying to do it in such a way that I'm not too fixed about anything until I see how the different things fit together. Okay, the tailor's dummy, and we get some curtain here. And some quite high windows, maybe 2 windows. Not sure where that'll be. So let me just quickly put a figure on, which is partly working with the sofa in this one and the figure in that one. So it is a small figure. So I've been working on some prepared paper. I'm running out of canvas, and so I've prepared a bit of paper with, not even with gesso actually, I've prepared it with emulsion. But that's okay, it doesn't, the oil doesn't seem to soak through. I think I said this already, we get this lovely light, so there's these patterns of light, which I also want to include in my painting. So I've made the figure a bit stronger, so now I better make the door a bit stronger if I'm going to be confident about my proportions and everything working together. This perspective, been mentioning, this is kind of part of the challenge of this exercise. These lines at the bottom of the door and the top of the door are converging. Now, I don't tend to worry about vanishing points and measuring anything. Just be aware of that idea that they need to be getting closer together as they go off into the distance. And if you're not too fixed about some of these lines, if you keep repainting them and giving yourself a bit of scope to adjust them, then they'll work better. Whereas if you try and fix them from the start, then you won't be able to move anything else. You won't be able to move them. Everything else will have to move with them. Whereas if you can keep everything moving, I think you're much better placed really to bring together things that possibly don't even fit together in life, but they do fit together in your painting. So I'm just doing a last thing there. Having made the figure a bit stronger, I think it makes sense to make the door jamb a bit stronger. And then I'll just got to decide a few things about the curtains. So I'll pause there, because if I'm happy with my painting or my drawing in the painting, I'll then start blocking in colour, and that might be useful for you to see. So I'll pause it and see if I do any more while you're not looking. I've worked on a little bit more with the monochrome start, and now I've mixed up some colours and I'm just going to start blocking in. And I think the places to start, I'm blocking in with card as well, which most of you know about, but might be new to one or two people. I mix up blocks of stocks of colour, and then by applying it with the card, I can work quite quickly and decisively, and there's a helpful way of simplifying. So because my paper's white, some of that colour is getting a bit brighter as it shows through. But I think the areas worth starting with, and that's what I'm doing here, is to block in this door. I want you to see that, because the door is, this is a big part of the whole idea, is framing the scene. So to get some colour onto the door, and I've made a kind of ochre, as I say, because I'm working on white, when I scrape it on, it's come out a little bit lighter than I want it to be, so I might just need to adjust that and compensate for that. But at least that's the door blocked in, and then I would look for other big areas. I think what I'm going to do next, I mean, it's tempting to work on the figure, but I think it's too soon to work on the figure. I would look for one or two other big areas, and notably there's a red rug on the floor with its nice light pattern on it. So that's what I'm doing next. And I've said this, I think, already, but the light's changing. The light changes dramatically in our house over the course of the day. And if that's what you're dealing with as well, then you firstly just observe, see what you like the look of. We get these, in this drawing I did here of Inez, this colour one, there was a big sort of window shape around her feet. And then the other windows were cast a block of light further over. I think I might have moved some of that as well. I can't remember. Anyway, my point being, at this stage, we're blocking in some big areas so that you can see how the composition works. Don't be tempted to start developing a figure if you've got a figure, or even anything in the room. Try and look for the big shapes, and you may have experienced this if you put colour in your drawing, or even when you were making the black and white drawing. Some things make a difference, like the frame of the door, the big area of the carpet, maybe it's the walls. Other things, when you draw them or paint them, don't seem to make a huge amount of difference. And if you can recognise that, then you're identifying the things that are significant, and they may be the things that you end up doing more with. Stands to reason. Something doesn't make any difference. So anyway, there's a bit of light on the carpet, because if my painting has got a point to it, it's a lot to do with the warm light on the carpet and the figure in that space. So because there's a lot of light and shade, I've mixed up two colours for the carpet. Other areas I would go on blocking in colour. Maybe the floorboards actually could be similar to the door. And if you want a sort of rule of thumb, start with the big areas. Look with your eyes half closed, because you might find that your painting is working better than you first thought. And occasionally, perhaps, if like me you've got a very tonal painting, occasionally go back to some of the darks. If things are disappearing, get a bit of a door handle back, darken up the door frame. If you're losing some of the drawing and you think it's going to be difficult to find your way, put in 1 or 2 darks as you go. So I'll work on this some more and maybe send you a photograph of a later stage, but that's probably enough information to get you started on this next project, if that suits you as a subject. It would be to find some views from one room to another, possibly put together something in colour. I'm sending out some photographs of figures if you want to try and incorporate them. And here I've started the painting, monochrome, blocking in big areas of colour, and I'll work on that over a period. There we go. Good luck with that.